Well, hello everyone. Hopefully you can hear me well and I don't trip over anything. So my name is Chris Kubecka. I'll move out of the way. If you don't know me, short version is I like to hack stuff. I've hacked a lot of stuff. I started young and I deal a lot with cyber diplomacy as well as still hacking stuff, especially Iran and certain other countries. So I like to have some fun. So if we go back to the beginning of the Ukrainian war, I was actually in Ukraine for a very specific reason. Part of my background is nuclear cyber incidents. I used to lecture for GCHQ's Center for the Protection of National Infrastructure, so I've been to all of the, or I think all of the British nuclear facilities, both enrichment and power plants. And I've handled about 6 nuclear cyber incidents. And I was asked to go to Ukraine in case there was a nuclear cyber incident and to stage. I ended up taking the last Air France flight to Ukraine before, everything got closed. So I myself woke up to shelling. The rest of the capital city did. And, we're seeing paratroopers coming in from the sky, as you do, They just blown up the airport, and we had decided to go a southern journey because everyone was going west. Towards Poland. You couldn't go east or north because Belarus or the Russians. And because I know some very good people, because we decided to go south, I asked them to help out with intelligence. So this great guy, Dutch OSINT guy, ended up tracking me to the point where the first city we went to take a break in, he told me, don't stop in that city. Bombing is imminent. And we had a convoy of 26 people and 2 vehicles sharply turned right, and everyone heard the sound and boom. A city with no military value had been blown up. So open source intelligence gathering and intelligence is very important when you're trying to escape a war, let me tell you. So it took days to actually get to safety. And during which, when I was trying to cross into Romania through the Syria border crossing, I discovered what Microsoft calls the first violation of the Geneva Convention via malware, because there was a wiper virus that the Russians used against the border patrol of Ukraine. They couldn't verify information, couldn't verify if your child was yours. And you're not going to leave your kid behind, all sorts of things like that. So if you saw the pictures of people with kilometers and kilometers of traffic at all of the border crossings, that was caused because the Border Patrol had to go to pencil and paper and let 1 car through at a time. At the border crossing I was at, someone froze to death waiting to use the bathroom. It was very cold. So I finally get to Romania, and I wake up in my hotel room, and I get this weird message saying, hey, Chris, you got out. Can you help this guy named Maurice Creek? It was one of my special forces buddies from the U.S. I'm not very good with names, I'll be honest with you. And it turns out he was a famous basketball player. And he was stuck in this place called Mykola. And Mykola, there is a river, a bridge, and the Russians were coming in on the other side. The Ukrainians were ready to blow the bridge for defensive purposes if they circled around. And they closed off any water traffic. So, of course, he couldn't head east or north. And via some of my intelligence friends, they had told me to very nicely inform Maurice, don't put anything on social media right now because some of the Russian troops are actually looking for high-value civilians to kidnap and ransom. So, just your normal day. And so I started getting a lot of information and contacting a lot of friends. I think I ended up hooking up to about 20-some different communications mediums, getting all sorts of stuff, figuring out drivers from Romania. There were some very, very cool drivers that were like, we're just going to go into Ukraine and start picking up people for free. So there was a concerted effort, but trying to connect these people. And also, in the case of Mykola, we had to negotiate to get what's called a special permit to try to go over the bridge, which they only allowed a couple of hours a day to get Maurice out. And luckily, we were able to get Maurice out, and he was able to get in a car as quickly as possible, go to the Moldovan border, and then come to Bucharest, where we celebrated by having a lovely meal. So that was good. And because of the publicity around this was from People magazine, a bunch of other orgs and NGOs and so forth contacted me going, can you help our people out? And I was like, well, the answer is yes. So Ukraine, for over a generation, has been known as high-value, low-cost education for a lot of the global south. And folks that just don't have money but want to study aeronautics, medicine, maritime stuff, agriculture on a high level, computer science. It gives a lot of people opportunities. Quite a few people who are educated in Ghana actually speak Russian and or Ukrainian from back in the day because they actually went to Ukraine and went to university. So I get contacted by this one group who says, we have over 1,000 students in Sumy, Ukraine. And to give you a bit of a picture, Russia, Sumy, and when the Russians started moving in, within a couple of hours, it was Russian controlled. And here we have students from India, from all sorts of parts of Africa, Bangladesh, Asia, you name it. And this was a problem because when the area started getting controlled by Russia, supplies were starting to get restricted. The Russians were trying to use this restriction of supplies to force the population to vote to be part of Russia. We ran into a warlord. Funny thing, I had to send a message to a former Intel friend going, I need to negotiate with a warlord this morning. Do you have any experience? So it was kind of an odd message for him to wake up to. We had some humanitarian folks who said they were humanitarians, but found out that they were actually smuggling lethal arms with people, which would have put them in a different category of the Geneva Conventions. And some of them were like, yeah, we'll bring food and medical supplies, but you have to know we're going to have weapons. And we're like, we can't have that. It's just a no-go. We had a fake mayor installed by the Russians to get supplies in. He said that we had to acknowledge him. So I ended up setting up a fake website that looked like a media thing with robots.txt to keep it from getting indexed. And as soon as he saw that, he let humanitarian supplies in, and then I pulled it down. So these are some of the things that had to be done. Another issue was if they wanted to buy supplies, they ended up being escorted by a Ukrainian officer, which meant the person buying supplies with this Ukrainian officer could be taken out by a Russian. Not awesome. Some of the embassies gave some terrible advice when it came to technology. This was a problem because we were trying to keep track of the students because, well, some of the students were at danger of being, victim to various war crimes. And then some of the governments were just corrupt as hell. We ran into one particular ambassador from a particular country in Russia that basically got paid to say, oh yeah, we want all of our students in Russia. And the students were like, no, they've been trying to kill us. We don't want to go to Russia. We also ran into bad water. People were getting infections. People were getting sick. So we ended up writing up a survival manual, which we crowdsourced a little bit from escaped students, former special forces, and myself. And when we tried to get them evacuated the first time, the Russians decided, oh, we're going to open a humanitarian corridor. They sent Russian buses and said, get on the buses, we're taking you to Russia. The students are like, no. And they started shooting at our students. Luckily, they were not killed, like one in Kyiv was killed. When we finally got a proper humanitarian corridor, We had buses. In the front was the Romanian Red Cross, and in the back with this convoy of over 1,000 students. And I get contacted that the Russians have just kidnapped the Red Cross and some of our buses. They pushed them into Russia, let the Red Cross exit Russia, and kept those students, some as young as 16. Then they tried to stop the buses and tried to pull female students off of the buses. So imagine this is what I'm trying to deal with, and so are many people. We need to get them the hell out of there, right? So we finally get the folks out of Sumy. And that was very rough. There was a lot of them. So then we get contacted that in Kherson, supposedly there's about 60 students. It ends up being 93. And it turns out that some of the students had COVID, some did not, but some had various medical issues. They could not get medication. They're facing some of the same challenges, not being allowed to leave because the Russians wanted to keep everyone there to force them to vote to be part of Russia. We had two particular folks where they were a Palestinian and an Israeli who are now best friends because they had to live through this for weeks. The bomb shelter they were in, the top of the building had already been destroyed, but the electric was still in the basement, so that's what they were living through. One particular woman, she was a Ukrainian, married to a student, 8.5 months pregnant, severe asthma, no inhaler, no access to a hospital. Some of our other students, when they tried to look for food and walk to a village, they were kidnapped by Russian soldiers, hood over, zip tied, brought to a torture room, tortured, and then put back into a truck and pushed out near the compound where the rest of the students were staying. And all of this, we're still trying to arrange some sort of humanitarian thing. We're trying to contact commercial companies to actually see if they can extract. And they're like, well, I'll give you a discount for $150,000, but I'm telling you, if you got 92, 93 people, from a pregnant woman all the way up to a 70-year-old professor, we're not going to be able to extract them. Then we had some incredibly terrible person who had seen some of the social media videos and contacted the student leader and said, I work for the Secret Service, we're going to extract you. Give us all of your contact information for all the students and the GPS locations. And it turns out he was not a federal person. He was a fake preacher who wanted to contact all of them to read the Bible to them. And the students had packed up, and all of a sudden their dreams were dashed. And some of them were suicidal because of this. So we had to kind of get them out as quickly as possible, right? So we're finally able to get them out with arranging with Romanian and local drivers. The Ukrainians had pushed back the Russian troops at the time, and they used that opportunity. I was asked, should they go? And I say, get the most vulnerable people in the cars first, but go. And that was, I think, about 3 a.m. local time. Leave now, because they might not have another chance. And so we routed them safe routes, figured out which bridges and roads had been bombed out or landmined to make sure that they didn't drive over a landmine, or if they had to go over a bridge, it was still there. And also, we correlated some of the information with which border area was safest, because apparently some neo-Nazi groups decided to use the opportunity at some of the border crossings to beat the hell out of some of these international students. So we were not going to send them into getting the hell beat out of them, right? So we had to use heat maps and things like that, police reports, and so forth. So lots of layers, sometimes diplomacy, lots of coordination. This is from Chimmy. He actually is watching this. He's one of the students. And I was so happy that he was able to get out, as well as all of these students. I think in total about 1,700 between the two cities. And it was very useful to use open source intelligence and even closed source intelligence, because I was also getting fed by retired, former, and active duty military from various countries trying to get these students out. Because one of the dangers is if the Russians get a hold of students from a particular country, they can then make sure that that particular country goes, well, we're going to agree with the Russians, especially if they came from certain African countries, because they had their kids. Imagine how that would look. So the risk of being used as a political pawn. So I ended up having to go to the press for help because some of the embassies were not great or giving really bad advice and could have gotten people killed if they didn't already. And I ended up from Romania going to Lisbon to do a talk at a university, and this chap named Gabriel was like, hey, let's talk. Let's meet at this coffee house. He didn't realize it was right next to the Russian embassy. Anyway, it was not the most comfortable spot for me. We ended up talking for a lot, and he's like, we got to get this out, and good tech advice as well, because some of these embassies are going to kill people. So we decided to do that, and so Vice, Motherboard, and a whole bunch of people ran some stories on it to try to get the word out, with also some of the news about the technology so that we could get more students out. Before the war, there were over 25,000 international students. Now, luckily, there are almost none. But some of them are now in Russia, being used as political pawns. Some of our Indian students, for example, were pushed into Russia, and we have not heard from them again. So I was able to contact a lot of people, crowdsource things like how to get food and lockpick food warehouses. A lot of the people I contacted were people like you that I meet at conferences. So if you ever get a DM from me going, can you help with this? It's probably something like this. Because we as a community have unique skills that we can use to save lives every day. So wanted to give a shout out to Dutch, who made sure all 26 of us survived. Karen, she's been wonderful. My now adopted Ukrainian family, Misha, who helped out so much. The journalists and everybody else, and all of you for listening. Thank you very much. I've got time for questions. Yes. So what I talked about survival skills, intelligence, and that I know a lot of people. My background is I was in the Air Force. I was one of the first female air crew members that was allowed to be in combat. So I had to go through something called SEER training, which is survival, evasion, recovery, and escape. POW mock-ups, they beat the hell out of you. You got to jump out of an airplane into the water, you know, all sorts of things. And because of that, I know a lot of people who were also in special forces, intelligence. My second career was Space Command, dealing with what's called command and control systems, and also protecting satellite telemetry data. So I worked a lot in interesting fields. And so it has helped me with interesting people that can help out in these types of situations. So it's a great question. There's got to be more questions because I have a bit of time. One back here. Yeah, what kept me going doing all of this, and I'm actually still involved in a lot of it, seeing some of the things that had occurred while we were leaving. We almost got killed. We almost got stopped, but we blew through the checkpoint of the Wagner group because they had also secretly set up in certain locations and were dropping propaganda. I do have a picture of the propaganda dropping truck. And then when I got to the border, close enough where I could walk, because we had about a 4 more day journey. So Misha and I walked up to the border, and we were told about the cyber attack. He showed them my wiki page and explained why I was there. And when we moved up to the most senior officer, he's like, I have to check you out using a landline because computers weren't working. Came back and said, you're on the high value target list because one of my books, that one, I make fun of Putin because I like doing that and hacking things in Russia. So I got the refugee light experience. Knowing that I got the refugee light experience and only coming away with, a fractured tibia and ankle out of the whole thing, I couldn't imagine living weeks in a bomb shelter. One of the things I had to put in the survival manual was the toilet tank water, not the bowl, was actually safe to drink because that's how desperate it was for clean water. And I couldn't imagine myself in that situation, or the situation of being a woman and getting pulled out and possibly tortured or raped, or anyone else under those circumstances. So that's what has kept me going this entire time.
So now, what can we all do to help you with what you're doing?
All right, so one of the things you can do, I do take Twitter DMs or try my best to follow people that follow me back or on LinkedIn. And if you say, hey, saw your talk, anything I can do, I'll try to put you on a list, a secured list. It's offline. And if I ever need any assistance, if you have any particular skills, and anything you can think of, even from survival skills, intel skills, communication skills, what have you, then I might have to reach out to you and go, hey, I've got this situation. Map skills, routing skills. I just had to route via a friend, husband, wife, and mother for the safest route to try to get out of Ukraine because of the recent bombings. So keep in contact. You don't have to follow me on Twitter, but I do take DMs. And if I reach out, I hope that you'll help out with the effort of either this or any other effort when it involves possible loss of life. I have 4 minutes. So any other questions? Or I'm going to have to drink. They'll make me drink, I think. In Ukraine? Interesting projects. Oh, I do like to hack stuff. We do have, a bit of an interesting project. My institute, the Middle East Institute, where I have a fancy title, we were asked to write the Abraham Cyber Peace Accord, so the cyber addendum to the Abraham Peace Accords, which is supported by Israel and UAE, and we're trying to add to it the support, because I think that in this day and age, we've seen that cyber weaponry can be used in malicious ways. I was telling someone earlier, I was supposed to go to Burkina Faso earlier this year until they had a coup in the capital city, and the reason being is there's a particular Islamist terrorist group that has purchased cyber weaponry from Iran. It's easier to send them that than it is to try to smuggle illegal arms. So we need to realize, or at least have our countries realize, this is no longer fantasy or these airplane novels or, funky movies with lots of things that blow up. Cyber warfare is being used along with physical warfare and also all sorts of surveillance, stealing of intellectual properties, trying to dox people by foreign governments. Like someone I know last year got put on Iranian news with his home address and one picture of him and his dog from social media, who happens to be an Israeli. So these types of things can be used against us. And it would be to a benefit that we try to look at what we do in those situations from the country level. So that might be an interesting project. Any more questions? Got a minute and a half. Any questions? All right. Done.